ADHD reWired, episode 478. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. All right, welcome back to another episode of ADHD reWired. We are here once again for our monthly live Q&A. We are joined by most of the usual suspects. Brendan is out today. He's got some family stuff going on, so we'll be thinking about him. But let's introduce our panelists, as I like to say, our panel of panelists. It's very profound. Let's start with Kristen.
Yes. I was mistakenly reading the chat. What did you ask me?
That is perfect. We'll keep it right there. Where are you just introducing yourself there? So that's Kristen
I'm
Marks.
Kristen from Arkansas. Hi.
ADHD reWired coach. And let's go next to MJ, the host of ADHD Diversified, yarner,
something,
whistleblower.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Why would you do that, Eric? Come on, man. You know better.
All right, MJ. And we got Will Curb, host of Hacking Your ADHD.
Good to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. And we got Lisa Ciesla, my assistant community manager and the extraordinary to-do list doer. What's going on, Lisa?
Hi, everyone.
And we got Kat Hoyer, one of our ADHD reWired coaches.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. And I did let everyone know that I slept with Scoots last night. I just needed to. I know it's the first time anybody's ever said that.
You too? All right. So many people on screen here have slept with you. And we have Scoots from the Sleep With Me podcast joining us today. What's going on, man?
Thanks for having me. I would say fell asleep to me or slept through my rambling, but yeah, whatever works. But yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So we'll have Scoots answer some questions too, and maybe ramble on through some questions as well. Maybe you can just tell us what your preference is with your questions. But we are going to start it off with a question from Matthew. Matthew, go ahead and share your question.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you calling on me for my question. I have a question about laziness and ADHD, and I want to acknowledge that lazy and laziness can be pretty pejorative. It is not my intention to trigger anyone listening, but I wanted to explore a topic for which I lack a less spicy word. One of the more powerful elements of embracing my diagnosis is coming to understand that my ADHD behaviors and tendencies can be mistaken for laziness by myself, mistaken for laziness by others observing me. To be sure, historically, this has been a very common and damaging explanation. So my question for the panel is, does laziness exist? Is laziness sometimes, or is it never an explanation for my circumstances? My choices are going to be different depending on which of those is true. The example would be like playing video games or reading a book rather than working on a task that is arguably more important. It could be that ADHD is limiting my ability to get started or to successfully disengage from the distraction. It could be that my dysregulated emotional response is an obstacle. Previous ADHD misfires have made me averse to trying the task that I could fail. But I can't help but notice that often the distracting activity is arguably more fun or more interesting than the activity I nominally would be doing. So is it possible that laziness explains some of my choices and behaviors? Is it possible that sometimes I just don't wanna, or is that just not a thing? And if it is a thing, how do I tell the difference between when it's ADHD in my way or laziness?
Yes, great question. Okay, so I think that there is one word that I think can separate the ADHD stuff from the pejorativeness of that word lazy, and that's intention. Right? It's when we have all this work to do, and we are thinking about all the work we have to do, but we're scrolling on Facebook or I don't know, binging episodes of Sleep with Me, whatever it is. To me, that's not laziness. That's executive dysfunction. To me, laziness is, all right, I'm taking the day and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. If that means I'm going to the beach or I'm just putzing around the house to do like intentionally doing random projects that may or may not even be important, but that's how you want to spend the day. Like, to me, it's about intentionality. Will, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I even wanted to push back on if you're taking the day off being lazy, that's also something important for us to be doing.
Yeah.
We have such a strong focus on needing to keep doing more and more stuff. And often we're not meeting our own needs. And that's where laziness comes in as an idea, is that, oh, I should be doing more, or other people think I should be doing more, but we're not meeting our needs. And that's how we get to burnout and all these other things. And it's kind of, I think intentionality is a good point here still, because we don't want to be doing those things unintentionally too, because it doesn't feel good then too, because we're like, feel guilty about it. So I like tossing out laziness and going with, hey, I'm taking the time off for me. This is self-care and it feels a lot better and I don't feel guilty about the things, even when I know that I could be using the time differently, but I don't have to. I'm using the time how I want to use it.
Yeah, and that my intention behind there was just sort of reclaiming the word because lazy was my original diagnosis as a kid. It's a hurtful one, right? It's like you have no idea what's going on up in this brain because if you did, you would see that it's not lazy. And science actually shows that. If you look at functional MRI scans, like if you look at the more activity in a brain as effort, you look at there are functional MRI scans that show people with ADHD doing sort of boring cognitive tasks are having to use way more effort in the brain and are not using the most efficient pathways in the brain. So if you're judging it just by what's happening sort of under the hood, man, ADHD people are hard workers. Kat?
I love to think of laziness as a symptom versus actually like it being exactly lazy, because when we talk about like how we're maybe avoiding things, I've noticed for me that could be confusion. I don't know what I'm going to do the next step. It could be overwhelm. I have too much to do and I'm not sure how to prioritize. Or it could be like you're saying, lazy. I'm going to reclaim the word. That really then is self-care. We're doing it with intention. So kind of looking at it and finding like, what is the emotion behind it? What is the thought behind it? And then deciding how to move forward from there, I think can be really helpful.
MJ.
Oh my God, I forgot I had my hand up. So when I was diagnosed with ADHD 4 years ago now, I used to tell my partner who also has ADHD, and he's the one who encouraged me to get a diagnosis. He's like, you're not lazy. And I have lived under the belief for a long time, and I'm still fighting with that belief that I am lazy and stupid. But, I also have come to realize I feel like that word kind of gets thrown around in ways that are harmful, right? Because then we label ourselves as such when I personally don't think it's true. For example, I used to be called lazy as a kid because I would have rather, played video games or played piano or gone biking with my friends. I had energy to do stuff and I could put all my energy into those things because I was interested in them. But if I didn't put my energy into homework or whatever my parents wanted me to do, then I was called lazy because I wasn't directing my energy towards what somebody else was expecting me to do. So my opinion is that it's misdirected. And the self-care part, right? Like how many of us are under the belief that self-care or rest means that we're being lazy? How many of us tie our productivity to our worth? How many of us have lived thinking that if we're not doing something that helps or impresses or is in the service of someone else, that we have been told that we're lazy? It's something that I'm still wrangling with, tied with the whole ADHD thing, and knowing now for the last 4 years that I wasn't stupid or lazy. I just have ADHD, and my energy was being directed to areas that I was interested in. And those were the areas that I sought dopamine in.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I got, if that makes sense.
I remember growing up, my mom used to yell at me and saying stuff like, you would rather just stare at a wall than get your homework done. It's like, I'm just having a hard time activating. I just didn't know how to describe that. Kristen?
So, a couple of things. I think going back to the idea of intention, like the other day, I was lazy. I was being lazy and I was okay with that. So, the piece that brought me to that is the idea of assessing. So, I think a lot of us have to individually go through those moments and then give ourselves the assessment afterwards to determine what was going on right then. Because a lot of times it's hard to be in the eye of the tornado, of whatever tornado that is, and be able to identify it immediately. So if you will start a practice of assessing afterwards, you can begin to better identify in the moment. I think that's one of the key things is all of us could sit here and tell you all these different things. And I think a practice that you could start doing is assessing following. Like Eric just said, no, he remembered having trouble activating. So there's intention behind it too. Like MJ said, energy. Yeah, I was being lazy on purpose for whatever reason I wanted to be lazy. And I didn't regret afterwards. And I think that's, what negative feeling comes up for you after.
Yeah, it's a big part of that. Scoots, you got any thoughts about this one?
Well, I definitely got, that was one of the terms I was called as a child, lazy. Back then, like when I was a kid, they could put it right on your report card, and then they changed it to not enough effort or something like that. But yeah, what I'm hearing is it feels like laziness has become this word to label a bunch of different things that are out of line with other people's expectations or our own expectations and how we talk to ourselves. Because I was like, and I think the idea of assessing it afterwards and looking for the intention of because I have a tendency to be avoidant or whatever, that's not what I'm doing every time I'm being lazy, but it's important for me to find places where I can see where I'm making a choice. Probably best time is afterwards or pausing before and being like, is this because I want to avoid this because it's frightening or stressful? I'm not familiar with this activating, but I can remember trying, a lot of this for me even is learning today, broadening my vocabulary of stuff I wasn't able to put into words at any point in my life. And it's like, well, I just can't do this. And they'd be like, no, you don't want to do this. No, you're lazy. And it's like, no, I can't do this. So yeah.
And it's so hard when it's hard to even explain to someone who doesn't get it, why we're doing or not doing these certain things. So because I did have a question for you, because I think that sometimes, especially around laziness, this idea of laziness, people can misunderstand that when something seems boring or mundane, we are dopamine seeking creatures. If it's exciting, if it's interesting, if it's engaging, our brain is in our happy place. If it's boring, it can be really hard. So here's my question for you, Scoots. So you do a really successful podcast on sleep. For anyone who has not heard Sleep With Me and you have any trouble sleeping, or you're just like, what is this podcast? And you're looking for something that's kind of a little bit out there and strange, but in a fantastically funny way. If you ever wondered, what does the inside of my brain sound like? Let's go listen to Sleep With Me. Here's my question for you. Part of your podcast is you explain your podcast every episode in a slightly different way. And you have 1,000+ episodes. Does that ever get so hard and boring for you that you're doing the same thing each time? Or how do you do it?
Oh, that's a good question. And I didn't think you were going in that direction with the boring question. I guess it's hard to explain when you hear the finished product, the process that creates the finished product, right? Because I don't think there's any time in my life when I'm more present and aware when things are going well when I'm recording a show. And so to make something sound so free and easy takes me really being in the moment. And for me, it's a big struggle. It's whatever you want to call it, my internal critic or my perfectionist side taking me out of the moment. And so when I'm doing the show, I always try to keep in mind that there's one person listening and then I'm talking to one person who maybe can't sleep, or maybe a listener I heard from that day or that week that had an impactful story. But it is about immersing myself and kind of being in this middle place where I'm listening to my thoughts. A part of that is editing podcasts or recording them when you're monitoring your audio, you're hearing your voice and you're talking at the same time. And that takes a little while to get used to. But once you get used to it, I feel like I have a producer brain that's kind of listening, or an editor brain, and being like, oh, okay, what are you saying? And what's this going to be like in the finished product? And that maybe is what allowed me to be more present for my own thoughts and more open to them. and then say, hey, what are you saying right now? Like, because a lot of times it does come up. I'm trying to describe, I mean, some of it is natural ability of like a normal podcast can explain what it's going to do in 30 seconds or less. For my podcast and for a sleep podcast, those are intertwined of like, well, I'm going to explain what it is. But my theory is if I did that in an efficient way, it doesn't lead towards bedtime. And that if I did it in a way that was the same every time, whatever keeps us awake, in my experience, is very, very adaptable. So it's like, well, a second, that guy said that same thing last night. Like, this is never going to work for me. I'm never going to sleep. And so it is about having kind of a playful openness, because that constantly comes up where I'm distracted. And then it's like, okay, well, let me just talk about what I'm distracted about, and then I'll return to it. And I don't know if this can apply in a greater lesson, but it does have a very specific structure at the same time. So anytime I feel agitated or nervous or like I can always return to the structure and I feel some comfort. It's like, okay, I'm getting nervous, or I'm starting to get too self-aware. So what's the next thing in the structure to talk about? So having the structure also gives me reassurance and keeps me calm.
I love too that you've taken something and you just have allowed yourself to play with your brain. That's what it seems like when I'm listening to it, and I love it. I love it. All right, let's do one more question before we take a break. Who do we got next? Hello, Jay. How's it going?
Not bad. Is my audio okay?
It's sounding all right. Go for it.
So my question is, I had ways that are no longer working for me, but what are some ways that you guys trick yourselves into getting up in the morning when the prospect of life is overwhelming and you are covered in cats and bed is safe and warm?
Sounds like a question that Scoots might be able to. This is like, or maybe that's like the other podcast, the Wake Up With Me podcast.
There are a few. I can't answer this question, actually. So I'm not a sleep doctor, but I do read a lot about sleep. And so I can talk from my personal experience, but also that there is a lot tied to like your morning routine and sleep. I'm also a person that suffers from addiction. And the only reason that's important is because having structure is very helpful to me. And so I found between my sleep struggles and my struggles with addiction that I do have to take the choice out of it for my morning routine. And so my morning routine and my evening routine it's not 100% all or nothing thing, but having a routine that I kind of don't have a personal choice in. It's like, oh, this is what I do. My alarm goes off. I go through what I read in the morning, do some meditation, but that I don't have to make a decision on that, like really is freeing to me. And also as far as sleep, it's like exposing yourself to sunlight. So I open the windows. At this time of year, I go upstairs and turn the heat on. So having those things, but removing the personal choice. I mean, most of the time, there could be a day where I'm not feeling good or whatever, but the less thinking I have to do for me, I found with these type of specific things, it just helps me be more consistent. And that's just my own personal experience with it.
Thanks, Keith. Kristen.
So, Jay, do you have a way to let light flood into your room in the mornings? Like a way that it can be set up so that you don't have to get out of bed to make it come in?
Yes, on multiple fronts. I can open my kind of blinds a little bit more. I also have smart lights that I've kind of set to turn on along with my alarm.
So have you had a practice of this and made some assessments around it? I've noticed for me, and I have to remember this, and then there's one other thing I noticed. I noticed for me that natural light will help me get up out of bed for some reason. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I've been noticing, and I have not been activating on, is I know when I turn on my music, that helps, and I'm forgetting to turn it on when I get up when I'm struggling. So I didn't know if there was some sort of other sensory thing for you that you could play with.
The music is an interesting idea. It's not one I've tried before. Part of the reason that I'm bringing this up is I'm kind of going through a depressive phase, which, happens. But I also know that if I get up in the morning when I want to get up, I, have time to do all of my personal stuff and kind of set myself up for the day in a way that feels good. So like the thing that I was doing was, okay, alarm goes off. I get up, I make hot chocolate. I read whatever book I'm reading for pleasure in that moment for like 15, 20 minutes, and then get on with the rest of my day. And the lure of the book is not working anymore.
Okay. Kat?
So I actually have a hack that has been working consistently for the last, I think, 2 or 3 weeks now, with the exception of 2 days that I was down with a migraine. I am making my bed every day with this thing, which I've never done before and I've always wanted to do. I had heard that the distinction between routine and rituals. And routine is something that is, habit stacking. A ritual is habit stacking with soul, so my woo-woo brain loved that. And I'd already had a morning routine of like the stuff that I have to do just to keep myself, my human, and my animals alive. And I named it. So I have a couple, there's my word for the year is Kaizen. And that is me like taking the processes of everything and looking at it and trying to make it better. So this is sort of the process of this. So I started, and the initial hack was to put the things that I needed to do to keep the family alive and make that into a fun. If you've listened to other episodes, you've heard me talk about the Hobo House, which is my last name, Hoyer, and my son's last name, Boss, together. That's why I found out people were wondering why I was using the word hobo. So we've got the Hobo Zoo Party. That's what we call it. That's the phase. But recently, I knew the timing of it because I'd been working on it. I decided to put it to a playlist. And I found a playlist with both of my cats' names, Pepper and Pippa. So it starts with Pippa, which if you want to hear the song, it's beautiful. And that's what I make my bed to every morning. And then Pepper, that's what I go downstairs to. And then Bree is my dog. And that's by the Butthole Surfers. How could I not have a good time with that? And then Cat, me. The last song is Trevor, and I sit down and I have my coffee with it. And I have it down to a science with this. It has been a process of about a year and a half, but right now I'm in heaven every morning and I look forward to making my bed. And the animals even know, like, oh, I hear this song. That means they sit quietly. They're not like bugging me for food like they normally do. They're like, I know I need to be patient because she's going to make the bed. And there she is telling us she's here. Okay. The end.
So someone was voicing their opinion over there. That's awesome. Scoot said something that I think is so spot on about when we sort of eliminate choice, it creates freedom, which I know is so paradoxical. But when we think about making choices is an executive function, right? The more we use our executive functions, the harder the day gets, so if we say, all right, this is the way we do it because we have other important things that we need to use higher level thinking for, that can be really, really helpful. Some other, I guess, hacks, we'll call it, that I would want to throw out there because I don't think we've talked about this in a while. I know you said you do hot chocolate. So I don't know if there's like a coffee pot equivalent to hot chocolate, but a hack that I suggest to people is if you have a coffee maker that has a timer on it, you set the timer to go off in the morning, but you don't put the coffee pot underneath it. You have to be there to make sure the coffee pot gets put under the actual thing. Otherwise, you're starting your day by cleaning up coffee. And
oh God, that sounds so stressful.
Well, I mean, it's kind of similar to a strategy I used to use to get myself to leave work and get home on time. And that was I set an alarm that if I wasn't home on time, it would actually wake up my son. And so that was like, it's like the bomb squad. So it sort of does a little bit of that like adrenaline activation, right? And it kind of worked for me. So something like that, if you can find that a little bit playful and not too stressful, but just enough stressful to activate, that could be helpful. There's also some apps that might be helpful. Wake and Shake is one that you have to really, really vigorously shake your phone, like insanely vigorously, in order to shut the alarm off. And what that does is it's going to increase blood flow, which is going to help activate all the juices that your brain needs to kind of get the day going. And then there's different apps that will require you to scan a QR code to shut the alarm off. And so you can maybe have a QR code that you have to scan that's in your kitchen. So those are some things that might help you get out of bed.
I like the QR code one. And I do like I have a coffee pot that I can kind of do that with and like do it as a tea thing instead of coffee. But yeah, I'll give that a shot. Thank you.
You bet. MJ?
Isn't there like a runaway alarm clock too where it's got wheels?
Clocky and Talkie. Yep. There's one with wheels, the other one wobbles. I think there was something that was created by, I think it was like 2 MIT students, but it's still on the market. There are lots of things sort of like that. So I hope that was helpful, Jay. All right, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, we have more questions from you that we will be answering. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our award-winning intensive coaching and accountability groups. Learn more at coachingrewired.com. Our summer sessions are just around the corner, starting on July 13th. So if you've been waiting for this summer to join us, then get on our interest list early at coachingrewired.com, because we might only be offering 3 sections for our upcoming season. This is subject to change, but as of this moment, that is the plan. And want to make sure that you get into a section that works best for your schedule? Then mark your calendars for our registration kickoff event on Thursday, May 4th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 Eastern. And while some may say, May the 4th be with you, I'll say you may join us on the 4th. See what I did there? It's also Coach Kristen Martz's birthday. So like a birthday party, you do need to get invited. How do you get invited? By going to coachingrewired.com, by adding your name to the interest list, and doing all the pre-registration things that we'll tell you all about when you get on our interest list at coachingrewired.com. When you join our coaching and accountability groups, our coaches and peer mentors will be there to foster a safe and supportive environment that's shame-free and judgment-free. Not only will you gain valuable skills and tools to level up your ADHD management, but we'll be there to coach you through integrating those skills and tools into your everyday life. So if you want to create your own personalized strategies to go from time blind to time wise, have your calendar reflect your priorities while setting healthy boundaries, and give yourself permission to dream big and take actions on the goals that matter to you, then get started by adding your name to our interest list at coachingrewired.com. And you won't have to do any of this alone. That's coachingrewired.com. Hey, are you looking for people that you can body double with to get your most important tasks complete? Would it be helpful to work with other people to keep you on track with the next thing on your to-do list? Sometimes I do too, because when ADHD gets in the way of my most dreaded tasks, I've always found that working with others helps me to stay engaged, which is why we created our Adult Study Hall community at adultstudyhall.com. It's only $19.99 a month, and it's free to try for the first week. If you like working in time blocks and being able to check in real time to give updates on your progress, then you'll gain access to our ASH Plus, or Adult Study Hall Plus sessions, which are our themed and guided sessions that happen every week. But if working at your own pace is more your speed, then our 24/7 drop-in room, or ASH 24/7, is open to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is free to try for the first week and only $19.99 a month after that. Come work with us at adultstudyhall.com. All right, we are back, and we have another question. Lisa, what is that question?
All right. It says, after finally finding the right medication, what is the next step? Self-help books, podcasts, routines are great, but don't stick long enough. Coaching options, question mark?
It's like you threw me a softball on this one. So may I suggest coachingrewired.com for our intensive coaching groups. And here's the thing. So some people look at our groups like, oh, that's really intense. Do I need that? I think if you are new to ADHD and you're trying to figure this out, like, can you figure this stuff out through podcasts, through books? Yeah. Can you make progress to working maybe with a one-on-one coach weekly? Yeah. Are you impatient and want to fast track this growth and get on with it? Come to our coaching groups. I mean, we've been doing this for a while, and I think part of what makes our groups really work is that part of it is just about being seen and understood, right? Like, oh, I do that too. Oh, that's an ADHD thing. Brendan even, because Brendan was way back in the day, he was a member of our coaching group. So one of the things that he said, it's like, yeah, it would take like at least a year to really like learn all the things sort of on your own that you could learn in 10 weeks in our coaching group. So I would highly encourage you, if you're able to do it, to look into our coaching groups. That was a beautiful softball question, and it really was a real question. So thank you for asking it. All right, what is our next question?
This one says, I know I should not be. However, I am somewhat ashamed of my diagnosis of ADHD. I feel so alone sometimes with it. Do you have a tip or two about how I can accept it and love myself more through it?
Community. Like that's being a part of community, being a part of, whether it's things like this, our free Facebook community, Patreon, or our coaching groups, that one of the reasons I love group is it is a shame elixir, right? Like because when we are carrying around all this shame and think that it's just us and nobody understands us, like we are carrying around not just all this shame, but also all this armor. Like, because we're so preoccupied with kind of not being found out, right? And all that does is it taxes our executive functions and makes our ADHD worse. So I really want to encourage you to, whether it's through the stuff that we offer, find an ADHD community. It is such an important part of the growth process. When I say that our groups, it's a coaching group. It is not therapy, but it's really therapeutic. Being with others who get you, who you don't have to explain yourself to, who you can lose your train of thought in the middle of what you're saying, and it actually is comforting to people because, like, we all kind of do that, right? Versus having to apologize, right? You don't have to apologize for being you. Like, you show up as who you are, and we embrace you. So, I hope that is helpful. Anyone want to add to that? Is there anything to add to that? Since it's a podcast, the looks on people's faces say that we think we covered it. But Kristen, you got something? Scoots?
I think that's a great answer. Like, that's the same thing I was thinking of, is like a community, but also I think there's like two phases of this. Like the answer would be like thinking of being of service to that community. But I think before that is just realizing that your experience will at some point be of service to someone else in that community that's experiencing what you are. And that maybe you get to that point where you can become an active member of the community and be of service to it, but that you are an asset and your experience will be an asset to that community. And at some point, maybe as you become integrated in the community, you'll be sharing that asset. And then someone else will be in your position to pass that on.
I knew it was a good idea to ask you on. I love that answer. That gave me goosebumps. All right. Do we have another question? Scoots, you have a question?
I do, actually.
Okay.
I have something I'm struggling with. So maybe I could get some advice for it.
Let's do it.
And I didn't even realize it till so over the past few years, I developed a routine. I work from home some days and from a co-working space other days. And when I work from home, since the pandemic, I work from my couch. Some of the benefits from that is it's comfortable. I could turn my TV on and off in case I need some other stimulation in the background if I'm doing something that feels not as engaging. And I'm very comfortable with it, but the couch has gotten worn in, and I noticed lately my back is starting to hurt. And I've slowly tried to do elimination stuff, and I'm like, man, I think working from the couch is what's bothering my back. And even that pain cannot get me to change my behavior, which I have a comfortable chair, I have a desk, I have a workplace. And I think it is part of that wanting the control over the distractions. And it's like, well, you could probably put YouTube on. And it's like, no, please don't. Please don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me. And I'm stuck in that place right now.
Okay. So how do we get the guy off the couch? Kristen?
It's an offering of putting together a science experiment for yourself and gather different types of seating and give yourself an assessment of what it's like to work for an hour on a yoga ball, or work for an hour on a bar stool, or work for an hour laying down on the floor. And I think, again, I'm going back to assessment again. If you can gather that information about yourself, maybe that would glean some insight for you that would provide you some sort of motivational piece too, to remind you, because we all can be creatures of habit for sure. And so maybe there's just not enough information there to help you want to change that, because you don't know exactly what you want to change it to at this point.
What do you think the resistance is to sitting in a chair versus the couch?
It is very tied to my limbic system, so it's hard to parse out, because it's like, oh, I just do not want to give this up. So looking at it like an experiment might be helpful, because it's like, I think it's just so tied to comfort and routine. Even though it's a known unknown, it's like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I can't possibly readjust that. It's impossible for me to readjust.
Are you a furniture rearranger?
No, I mean, I guess like at some point, I mean, only as a distraction if I'm avoiding something else.
That used to be my favorite time to rearrange like furniture, when I had a really important project that I needed to get started on. What about Lisa Blessing put in the chat? What about a new couch?
I don't think it's I think it is like a bad habit, like for my back. It very similar to bedtime hygiene says that you should only use your bed for sleeping and nocturnal activities only, not even for reading and stuff like that. And I guess I look at it like that. It's like, oh, I'm using my couch as a workplace when it's not a workplace, and my body's saying doesn't work for us.
And I think something Eric said made me want to get clarification. I thought what I heard was that it's not about motivation or sticking to routine. It's about your discovery that you think it's causing back pain. Did I get that right?
Yeah, as far as my work goes, it doesn't interrupt my work, but it's like I'm seeing, yeah.
So here's my prediction. If I were, a genie and can, fortune teller, it is working for you right now to get your work done. I'm imagining that that's where the resistance comes in, because the minute we change something, then we have a fear of what else is this going to change for me? That's a guess.
That hits home. Yeah.
MJ?
Yeah, change is hard. And I used to sit on a dining room table chair to get my work done, and it worked, and I was getting my work done. But same thing, I was having, back pain and all that kind of stuff. And then I got an ergonomic chair that's meant for short people because I'm short. It was uncomfortable at first, but over the long term, I've noticed a huge difference in my posture, in headaches, in back pain. I also wear custom orthotics because I'm very flat-footed, so that actually has also helped a lot if I'm walking around. I don't know if that might help make a difference, just a quick suggestion. But have you given yourself a chance to sit in a different chair long enough to feel the difference in your body over the long term?
No.
Would that be something that you are open to trying when you find maybe not even the right chair, but just a chair that might make a difference, even if it's starting off with maybe a different part of the couch where, you haven't pushed an indent into it yet? Have done that. A dining room chair, just any different kind of sitting position where it might help. Something that also helps me while I am at home, now that I'm used to sitting in this chair, is I still like to curl up in my chair, is I have indoor shoes so that I can't put my feet up. So I would encourage you to give it a try if you haven't given yourself a chance to, because it's hard to know right away, but over the long term, you might start to notice a difference, and it may be helpful to write down your observations and feelings and journal about it.
Lisa?
I was just going to say, to MJ's point, I wouldn't completely take the couch off the table. I would maybe start the day in a different chair.
Who's putting a couch on a table? That's just worthless.
Sorry. That's probably really uncomfortable then. But maybe do like the first part of your day in a different chair, and then after lunch be like, all right, it's after lunch, I got to get to my couch. Like, I feel that.
Kat?
So a couple of things. One, I totally relate to like working from home, and especially like I had an office outside my house during the pandemic and then let it go shortly after. So one of the things I would do, if you don't notice a theme here, I like to try to keep things novel and fun. So what I would do was had different parts of my house as different activities. So in this area that's now my office, I would do reading and things like that because there's a comfortable chair here. Didn't have my desk here. I had other places I called it different things because I like working from different areas, meaning I like working from a coffee shop, different settings, I should say. So the office was my coffee shop because I like to do like reading and, more relaxing things. The dining room was my, I call it the cafe. So that was where I could do more productive type work. And then at the time, my desk was in my living room, and that was my office. But I would move around from space to space. So I love what Kristen said in terms of like experimenting and finding out what might some options be. And then I'm also wondering, kind of adding on to that would be, what is it that you like so much about the sofa that you're like, oh, it's comfortable. But I heard you say I can also turn on the TV. So it might be like, well, but if I go to this other space, I won't have these different options. So I think inventorying the options that you like there and seeing, can I duplicate them somewhere else? So can I have either a TV in my office or, those kinds of things. So making sure that you know what it is that you like and seeing if it's something that you could either live without or duplicate somewhere else in a different setting.
Well,
Often I find with habit change is that it's really important to realize we're almost always going to take the path of least resistance. And so that means for a lot of things, how can we make doing work on the couch more difficult for us? How can we make doing work where we want to work easier? And just looking at those options of being like, okay, I'm going to put my laundry baskets on the couch so that I have to move them if I want to sit there, and then make my workspace more enjoyable to be at. That way we're kind of creating resistance to what we don't want and lowering resistance to what we do want to do.
is that helpful?
I got 2 Post-it notes full right now that I can keep on my laptop. So, and I haven't even hit the chat yet. So this is amazing. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Awesome. All right, let's go on to another question.
So we have a question with a couple of upvotes, and it says, just lost 3 months to a game, deleted the game. How do I start to get back on track?
Oh, I feel you. So I once lost 2 years to a game. It's probably been a while since I told the story. So when I had my clinical practice, all of my clients were playing Minecraft. So as a good therapist, I'm like, all right, I gotta, what are they talking about? They're all coming in talking about Minecraft. So it was like 9:30 at night one night. And so I downloaded Minecraft on my iPad. And then I looked up at the clock. It was 3 a.m. And I had not lost time like that since like college. Like I still so vividly remember like going, oh, what just happened? And I remember actually taking my iPad to my therapist, asking her, will you please delete this app for me? I keep telling myself I'm going to play for 10 minutes and I play for 3 hours. And I was literally, for years, I was doing it. It's probably good that particular iPad no longer works because I was thinking about like doing a whole fly through in my world because what I built was kind of amazing and evidence of how much time I spent on this game. So how do you get back? It's kind of like, let's say you were a marathon runner and you used to run marathons, but you've been hanging out next to Scoots for a while on the couch and you haven't been able to get up for a while. And you're now deciding, all right, I want to get back to running. You don't get up and start a marathon. You get up and get off the couch and maybe you walk around the block. And then maybe you add a little bit of jogging in there. And you just keep incrementally increasing it. We have to sort of let go that we're no longer where we were and that time is gone, right? But what we can do is start today and start now with what's the next step. Kristen?
Okay, I have a couple of thoughts about this one. The first one that came to me was the strengths-based perspective question of what was it in the past that helped you get on track with whatever it is that you do? And maybe you can generalize that. Maybe there is, how you get started on a project and you can figure that out and then transfer it too. The other thing is, did you assess why you were playing that game so much? And have you allowed for a space of replacement in the sense of, for example, I've deleted all my games on my phone before too, and it felt very powerful. And 3 weeks later, they started slowly creeping back in because it wasn't the game, it was something else. And if we don't confront whatever that something else is and have a plan for it, we're likely just to replace it with something just as impactful, negative or positive. So I would think that was something to be, kind of looked at, processed, and figured out too. Yeah.
You could also use accountability too. If it's a iPad or iPhone game, right? You can do screenshots of your in the settings. You can see what apps you're using and for how long. And sometimes just seeing that black and white, like I spent how much time on it this week, is enough to go, oh shit, and and give you enough pause to go, this is not what I want to be doing. I love video games. What I don't love is I am horrible at regulating myself playing video games. So I'm someone who can't really play video games, right? Like it's because the ADHD brain, we like, oh, if a little bit's good, like more must be better. Except not.
So, Eric,
Yeah.
what have you replaced it with to get the initial dopamine hit that you would get from it? Or the initial, I need to avoid for just a little bit, then get back to it. What have you replaced that with?
I think part of it is more of an ounce of prevention. It's like I don't add games to my and I have slipped and absolutely. But I think that part of what I've noticed is that when I am sort of in general understimulated, I tend to go towards the games.
So, what else stimulates you is what I'm asking.
Pickleball, motorcycles, music.
And those things can have an ending point better than these games where they are psychologically studied to keep you there.
Oh, absolutely. So many of these games are designed to keep you there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
studied and designed. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, when I first started playing Minecraft, there was a limit to the world. And then they added an update, and this was years and years ago, that it's literally endless. And I knew that I was screwed as soon as they added that update. Right. So it's and in full transparency and disclosure, I'm again playing Minecraft because my son wants to play it, but I would give myself a B+ on not playing it. So, not perfect, but pretty good.
I would go back to intention also. You just said I'm playing it again because my son wants to play it. So reminding yourself of what's your intention in that moment, that could help you with an endpoint too.
All right. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have another question for you to be up.
And we'll be right back.
Are you tired of trying to keep up with the ever-changing world around you? Do you feel like your ADHD just won't give you a break? Introducing the Focus Frolicker 3000, the world's first ADHD-powered hamster wheel. That's right, the Focus Frolicker 3000 combines your love for absurdity with a touch of ADHD ingenuity. Perfect for listeners of the ADHD reWired podcast who crave a quirky, out-of-the-box solution to channel their boundless energy. But wait, there's more. The Focus Frolicker 3000 doesn't just let you spin in circles aimlessly. With every whirl on this bad boy, you'll generate focus fuel that powers up your very own attention amplifier. This state-of-the-art gadget syncs with your brainwaves and zaps you back into productivity mode. You might be thinking, this sounds like science fiction. Well, dear listeners, we are living in the future. A future where your ADHD is your superpower and the Focus Frolicker 3000 is your trusty sidekick. So how can you get your hands on this marvel of modern engineering? It's as simple as texting FOCUS to 1-800-ADHD-FTW. If you order now, we'll throw in a limited edition squirrel-shaped stress ball. For those moments where you need a friendly reminder that, yes, you can focus just after you catch that squirrel. The Focus Frolicker 3000, it's not just a hamster wheel, it's a revolution in ADHD management. Get yours today and spin your way into a more focused tomorrow. The Focus Frolicker 3000 is a fictional product and a not real solution for ADHD management. For actual advice and support on living with ADHD, tune in to the ADHD reWired podcast and other podcasts found here on the ADHD reWired podcast network. All right. What's our next question?
Hey, we have a question for Scoots. It says, Scoots, how did you come up with the Sleep With Me podcast style you use? Was it a default process, or were you intentionally embracing and capitalizing on the pointless, meandering train of thought? It's inspiring to me that you help others with exactly what is normally considered problematic, the aimlessly rambling brain.
Okay, that's a good question. But I'm distracted though by the video game thing, because I had that discussion with somebody recently. This is a strategy I use for a lot of things, is having a timer, which I don't necessarily like. And I found that me and this other guy were talking about it because he was having a problem with it. And I was like, oh, well, what I found is if I had free time, on a Sunday, and I was like, okay, well, today I'm going to use my free time to try to play a game, but I can't regulate, like you're saying. I started using a timer. I was like, okay, I'll do 30 minutes of games, 15 minutes of chores. And I told him, I was like, it took the joy right out. It was like, if I stuck to the timer, it took all the joy out of playing the game. And I was like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but it makes me suspicious that it's probably not a best use of my time. I'm getting something out of it that's not fulfilling. So maybe having a timer, if it strips the joy out of it, maybe that you as a part of the assessment process. But to go to Sleep With Me and how I came up, the idea came from two places. the initial idea for the show, or I guess three places. One was that starting at about fourth and fifth grade, I was having a lot of trouble at school and it was very painful. And I would stay up all night worrying about going to school, terrified of what was going to happen the next day, or playing out scenarios of how I could predict what was going to happen. And so I couldn't sleep. And most adults in my life that I encountered, they didn't have an issue sleeping. So they were like, oh, why don't you try this or this? Why don't you try not to think about school? Which was not possible for me. And so I would stay up all night and I shared a room with my brother, but it became more and more lonely. This one kid at school one day was telling me, oh, my older brother listens to comedy radio. Like maybe you could start listening to comedy radio. It's on late nights. And so I started listening to comedy radio, and that never put me to sleep. But again, to go back to the community thing, even though it was in a real community, it made me feel like I was a part of something, and it just got me outside of my head. And eventually I'd fall asleep sometimes listening to it, but it just was like that pain from the childhood and then that escape and the relief, the comedy radio stuck with me for a long time. And I started listening to podcasts. And I also, at some point over the years, developed a skill where I didn't realize it was necessarily put people to sleep. But if we were on a camping trip or something, I'd be like, oh, give me like 5 things and I'll make up a story about it with friends. And the stories would always be silly and goofy. And once I started listening to podcasts and I realized you could make podcasts about anything and you don't really need you just try and see what happens. It was like, oh, okay, well, what about if you took these things and put them together as a podcast, like to put people to sleep? And that was about like 7 years before it was like, no, that's a terrible idea. Like that part of my brain was like, no, do not do it. And then I would push the idea back down and then it would pop back up at 6 months. Why don't you make that into a podcast? Or, oh, you could do this story as that. And no, it's a terrible idea. Eventually things just lined up and there was just a crack in the rocks or a crack in the door. And I was like, oh, let me go through and try to make this podcast. And then it kind of was just developing. It was like making a lot of mistakes and kind of being open to like, this is something that's more process based of what would this be? And also constantly not just taking feedback, but really, I mean, since I was a sleepless person, constantly putting myself in the listener experience place of like, what is experiencing this like? And what would I want as a listener? Or what would I want? And just kind of taking those things from there and being open and trying to put my expectations on hold and my results thinking on hold and just be like, hey, what does this be? Or what could this be? And it took about 3 years of making the show 3 times a week till I feel like till it started to really form into something like the clay kind of started to loosen. It was hard before that and I could form it into something.
I love that. I love how, we always hear this idea of like, oh, the overnight success. Like, well, do you know how many years it takes for that to happen? Right. And like from the self-doubt to the, not being sure exactly on the format. I hope that all listeners who have some idea, and if that part of your brain is saying, nah, that doesn't make sense, or that's not going to work. Like, we tend to all have this little bit of this oppositional tendency in us. Could we apply that towards our own self-doubt and say, oh yeah, like watch what I'm going to do. So that was awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right. We have time for another one.
Okay, this one says, one of my main problems is paralysis when I start to feel overwhelmed. I have so much to do, I can't decide what to work on, so I end up doing nothing. How can I calm that feeling without ignoring all the things I'm behind on?
Move. For real, like get movement. Like that is, even if you have 1,000 things on your list, you're like, oh, but I gotta be doing this, but you're not, right? Movement opens up the brain. It's amazing. Like when if I'm stuck and overwhelmed on stuff, when I'm exercising, it's like my to-do list starts to line itself up, right? And it becomes more organized. I know high performance coaches who won't even work with clients unless they are in some kind of rigorous exercise program. It's that important for action. And the other idea behind this, you keep breaking it down until the first step of whatever the action is, it seems easy enough to start. Will?
One idea that I had come up with is if you have a to-do list and you're looking at it, it just looks too long, just kind of cut it in half. If you're going to do nothing, if you don't do that, it's better to just do something. And as Eric's saying, you get the movement in then, and then you get that momentum to keep doing things. Although I will temper that once you start feeling like aim to do 1 to 3 things. Don't aim to do 20 things, because it's easy to burn ourselves out with that momentum as well.
And there's a little secret that I think a lot of us ADHDers don't realize is that people, even without ADHD, aren't getting everything done on their to-do list either. And I think that it happens to be that we are the ones that think we're the only ones that aren't getting stuff done, but it's actually super normal. Which is why in our coaching groups, we spend a lot of time focusing on prioritization. Dream big, put all the things that come to your mind, but learning those skills of prioritization, I think, is so helpful. It's one of the reasons we utilize the book The One Thing by Gary Keller, because we find that it's a very helpful way to sort of think through how do we identify what is the priority when our brain's tendency is to look at everything and say it's all equally important, right? So there are thinking strategies that can help us identify what is actually most important. And now it's 1 to 3 things, like focus on that. Kristen.
So 2 tips or tricks. One of them is if it's the list that's overwhelming because you see the list. I learned this from one of my AT members that she got from someplace else. The idea was to wait a minute, I'm doing it wrong. Was to take a piece of paper, and I think you fold it backwards, and you have your full list down the right side. You take a couple things and move them over here and do those things, especially if that's if that's what's over, and that helps you keep it in your hands and in your space so you can see it, but also keep it out of sight too, the big list. If it's the prioritizing that is baffling you, if you can gamify it instead, make it a target board, throw targets at it, make a spinner online, generate that. I know one of my members one time said she got one of the dry erase die from the dollar store, and she wrote the different things that she didn't know what was supposed to go first. And she would play fetch with her dog for a few minutes. And on the last fetch, she'd grab it, and wherever that thumb was, she'd go, okay, that's the one I got to do next. Okay, go play. And she'd do her thing, and then she'd go back and play fetchy. So she was incorporating it into all the things that she was doing that day and keeping a brain break going and gamifying it. So it's a matter, again, of what is it that's overwhelming you? What's putting you in that paralysis? Is it prioritization? Is it the visual is too much? That can help you find what to do next to help not resolve it, but assuage it, maybe.
That's great. Kat?
We do some of the practices within the coaching groups and alumni, and even in some of the ASH functions that we do, where we'll journal first about. And so this is an idea of maybe journaling about, what am I feeling right now? What's going on? And kind of getting in touch with the feeling of what might be holding us back. Again, identifying, is it overwhelm? Is it confusion? Not knowing what to do next. So that's one idea. Another idea, I know that it's not called I know it's not actual breath of fire. That's what I call it in my head because it makes sense to me. But it's a breathing exercise that I do sometimes to, like, if I'm like, I have the I don't wannas, it's you raise your hands. So for people on the podcast, I'm going to say what I'm doing. You raise your hand above your head and pull it down kind of in a fist form, and inhale, exhale with each one. So, and I do it probably 20 times. So it's inhale when you go up and exhale when you come down, and just do that about 20 times. And the activation of that, like you were saying, Eric, it's really just getting yourself moving, but that helps. And it was one of the very first things that I taught my groups. And when I can tell they're feeling tired, I'm like, does anybody need to do the little breath exercise? So
and Kat, isn't that a brain science thing too? You are turning on the switch of the parasympathetic nervous system to calm everything back down. So, because I used to think that people were being, I forget what the word is, but bothersome to me. Go take it. Would you want to drink water? Drink water. I learned years later. My therapist said, "Oh no, that you swallowing actually turns that on," and I was like, "Oh, it's real. Cool."
Now I can believe it.
That's awesome. All right. Let's see. What else do we got here? We have any other questions? I know we're cutting towards the end here.
This one says, a question related to the national med shortage. I've been having a hard time getting my medication since December, and there's no estimated time when this shortage will be resolved. I usually don't know that the pharmacy is out until the doctor sends in and tells me they are out, unless I call beforehand. Does anyone have any experience with this and input on how to streamline getting their meds during a shortage? Getting to know my local pharmacy is the standard suggestion, but has never worked for me.
My first thought is it sucks. Like, it sucks. There's really nothing else to say other than like this. It is a shitty situation that none of us should have to be in, but it's a real issue. And the calling around, like, it's like all the things that are suggested that we do, we need the meds in order to actually do them, right? It's this feeling like it's this catch-22. I have found better luck with the non-chain pharmacies. So I don't know if you've looked at that. Also, if you contact the manufacturer of the medication, they can often tell you in more real time, like, who's got supply. And then the other options that can be to look at, unfortunately, like looking at other medications, right? I mean, there are a lot of stimulant medications out there. It stinks when we find a medication that's actually working for us, but if we can't get it, it's not working for us. We feel you, and I think we're all with you on feeling the pain on that. I know it's been just Adderall, I think, is the one that's been affected. Kat?
That's what I was going to say. Like, I haven't had any experience with it because I don't use Adderall anymore. That's not my prescription. So is this a time to maybe look at other things? If it's working for you, don't. But if you're like me, my prescription was Adderall for years, and I was afraid to try anything else. And I used the shortage as an excuse to try something else. And I'm really glad that I did.
That's a great example of turning lemons into lemonade, right? It's like, how do you find the opportunity in a non-opportune situation? All right. Scoots, can I put you on the spot here for a sec? Can you give us just a summary of our Q&A in a Sleep With Me Scoots style?
Do you have a transcript you could send me? No.
Yes, actually we do, because that's an accommodation.
Well, but it's a live track. Oh, let's see. Let's.
Are you seeing it? I don't know if you have to hit it first for it to show up, because I have it. I can send it to you maybe. Let's see.
I'm sitting here looking for the transcript and trying to rack my brain as I was bouncing between the chat and my couch and the chair I'm sitting in now, and hearing a lot of the parallels of people, and thinking about the people that listen to my podcast and the people that are here today and the things we share. And a lot of it is that lonely feeling that you have trouble explaining to people. But when you're in a community of people that have those same feelings, you instantly feel a connection. And that kind of seems like the start of something. But then when you encounter people with a little bit more experience on the path, that have had their own people that have guided them through it, then they can start to help you see the way and say, hey, I've been to this part of the path before. And yeah, this looks like this. There's a couple different ways we could get around this obstacle or deal with this thing. And I'm here to help you because I know how, and also I know how it feels. And that's one of the reasons I want to help you. So why don't you try this out? Or you could try this way. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the way that option looks. So, well, you could try this one out, or you could think about it this way. Or here's another thing you could try. Which one would you like to choose out of these options? And so that's I almost was starting to doze off myself there, but
my body literally just started like feeling like it was about to fall asleep. Like, it's this relaxation, which if you ever are looking for something else to do, maybe like a coffee break podcast with just like 5 minutes of that, like, because that's, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Like, I love that tangents and rambling can be a skill, because you're a gift to all of us. Thank you.
well, it's a reminder to everyone out there, kind of like my story is, that it was these pieces that came together for me, and not all of them were things that were positive, and not all of these traits that I get to give a showcase to on the podcast and be open to and be loving to. I was not loving most of my life about those parts of me. And there's a lot of harsh criticism, self-criticism, and self-talk. And it did take a part of the journey and getting help from other people and other resources to be like, hey, like, what if? you could try this new way? What if you could try this and be a little bit nicer? And those were all baby steps. And for me, it's still baby steps. And reminding and always forgetting every day that it is a process and that it's not results. Yeah, I have to stay out of the results business myself. But yeah, so thanks for having me on.
Oh, this was so much fun. You are welcome back for real anytime. All right, so that's all the time we have. But before we go, I'm going to hand it on over to Will, who is going to leave us with a moment of dad.
Yeah. Well, did you know that T-shirt is short for Tyrannosaurus shirt? It's because of the short arms.
I feel like I like that one way more than I probably should. Like,
Yeah, that's way funnier than it has any right to be.
That was awesome.
Does that mean all of
When I put my shirt on, I'm only going to keep my hands right here for a while, just for fun.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for your questions. Scoots, thank you. Everyone here, thank you so much. We couldn't do this without you. And thanks for playing with us, because we absolutely have so much fun doing this. And what makes it even better is that we're helping you and we're having fun doing it. So thanks for being here. We will catch you next month, same time, same place. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD reWired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD reWired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD reWired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all of the shows on the ADHD reWired podcast network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD reWired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins, Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown, The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey, Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden, The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great. Starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD reWired, click the button to be a guest at the top of the page, and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.